Welcome to the show. Coming up, Anthony Albanese refuses to comment on the stunning call by the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor for Israel's Prime Minister to be arrested for war crimes.
Well, I don't comment on court processes.
How gutless. And I'll show you how Albanese actually contradicted himself just minutes later. But if he won't comment, we certainly will. I'll talk to Melanie Phillips on this legal stitch-up and show you evidence that this International Criminal Court is swallowing a Hamas lie. Also tonight, the Queensland Labor Premier embarrasses the Albanese government by backing Peter Dutton on immigration, and calls by the opposition to send police into our universities to clear out anti-Israel protest camps. We'll also tackle the tough topics, like why are women especially attracted to a new rage therapy that has them hitting the ground with sticks and screaming. But first, the chances of Anthony Albanese calling an early election today, well, got higher because the news got worse. In particular, Telstra today said it will sack up to 2,800 of its workers. That one decision by one company sacking nearly 3,000 people is the equivalent of increasing the number of unemployed Australians by 0.5%, when the unemployment rate last month already jumped to 4.1%. Now, the kicker in the Telstra sackings is among the reasons given today by its CEO for these sackings.
Our industry and the world we are operating in is fast changing. We have new and different competitors. We have rapid advances in technologies happening. Our customer needs continue to evolve, and we have ongoing inflationary and cost pressures.
Oh, those cost pressures like inflation. Now, true, Telstra is, as she said, also focusing more on its core business and on using artificial intelligence to help customers fix their problems. I mean, artificial intelligence can go through all their service history, find patterns and problems, and sum it all up in a sentence or two, and all that in a matter of, well, how long does it take? 30 seconds? Less? AI is a big job killer. But Telstra is also struggling against the rising costs we're all facing. Inflation, interest rates, power prices. And opposition leader Peter Dutton today pounced.
As the Telstra CEO pointed out, it's a tough economic environment out there at the moment, and it's deteriorating. We saw today from AEMO, the energy regulator, a very stark warning to the government that unless you get the energy picture right, we're going to end up with higher electricity costs and blackouts and brownouts.
No, yes, brownouts as well. The Australian Energy Market Operator did indeed just warn that the danger of power blackouts and brownouts next summer just got even higher in Victoria and New South Wales because this supposed transition to wind and solar power to save the planet is not going anywhere as smoothly as Labor predicted. Who's surprised? Now, this report says the transmission wires we need aren't being built fast enough, nor are the wind and solar plants to supposedly replace all the coal-fired power stations Labor is helping to drive out of business. But Energy Minister Chris Bowen today was in total denial.
Well, this is the process working.
This is working? I mean, remember, power blackouts and electricity shortages, they really hurt manufacturers and other companies like Telstra. And that's what we're seeing. But this Bowen saying, well, don't worry. This warning from AEMO, it just means that people are going to fix things because we did go through last summer all right, didn't we?
Lots of people said there were going to be blackouts this last summer. Peter Dutton and Ted O'Brien wandered around saying there were going to be lights going out and causing all sorts of fear in the community. There were no blackouts caused by a lack of electricity. We had issues with cyclones and transmission towers falling over. That can happen to anyone.
I find it scary that this bloke is in charge of the nation's electricity. For one, those blackouts were caused in part, not just because of a storm, but by having a power supply that's not stable enough, in Victoria at least, to handle that storm blowing over some power lines. Wind power crashed at the same time as well. Couldn't handle it, bang. As for avoiding other blackouts last summer, well, one reason is simple. The summer was mild. Melbourne, for instance, didn't have a single day in January or December either that was over 35 degrees. And that means, of course, less air conditioning was being used. But now AEMO's warning that this safety margin between the power we have and the power consumers might want is even less than last year. The danger is higher. And to get us through it, it's going to have to pay some manufacturers your money not to use electricity. We've got now a supply of non-electricity. What a farce. What was it again that Bowen said?
Well, this is the process working.
So here's what's happening. The economy's in trouble, the power system is crumbling, and more people will lose their jobs. And all of that's likely to get worse over the next year. I don't think interest rates are going to come tumbling down fast. So when would you hold an election if you were Anthony Albanese? Would you wait until next May when it's clear that the government's plans are not working? Or would you do it rather sooner before voters wake up to it all? And here's a mystery, right? We're running out of electricity for the Australians here already. We're running out of houses for the Australians here already. So why did this government import almost 1 million more immigrants in just 2 years and make all that worse? Joining me is the National Senator Matt Canavan, the former Resources Minister. Matt Canavan, good to see you again. Look, Chris Bowen says the warnings today from the energy market operator of the danger of brownouts and blackouts next summer, that's just the system working. It's just a warning. Governments and investors will then step in and fix it all, problem solved. Is that how you see it?
Well, Labor has run a big experiment on our energy system, and I suppose, like all scientists, they established a hypothesis. The Labor Party said that if they got into power and were able to invest more in renewable energy and wind and solar, your power bills, your viewers' power bills would fall by $275. They said that would happen next financial year. So just in a few months' time, just over a month now, your bill would fall by $275. That promise has been failed to be delivered. And so Labor's experiment with renewables has failed. And now not only is our power more expensive, we are quickly learning that our electricity system is much, much less reliable. And as you said in your editorial, if we can't guarantee that the lights can stay on, no one is going to invest in this country to make things, to run an efficient factory, to compete on the world stage, which our manufacturers have to do. You have to be able to keep the lights on all the time. They run 24/7, most factories. And so we are now designing a system that is weather dependent. And if I can just quote one sentence from this report to you, Andrew, sorry to look away from the camera, but I want to get it right. This report, buried in the second half of the report, the energy market operator says that wind and solar generators are found to have low relative reliability benefits, which are likely to decline further as reliability risks are increasingly concentrated outside of periods of wind and solar availability. I mean, it's actually quite clear. That sentence should have been on the first page, but it's buried later in the report, and it effectively bells the cat here, saying investing more in wind and solar is not going to solve these reliability issues. So why is the Labor government obsessed with it?
It's so true. I mean, particularly when you see quite often that wind droughts extend over, you can build 10 times more wind farms, but if they're all in the same, say, state, the wind drought can happen at exactly the same time. So it doesn't make any good. You're not fixing anything. Now, when we get to the stage, right, where the New South Wales government is almost certainly, I mean, it's in negotiations, going to have to pay the Eraring Power Station, coal-fired, to stay open and not shut next year as planned, when we're having to pay companies not to use electricity to make things, when all this is happening, it's obviously clear that fixing Labor's green energy plans is going to cost us far more already than we're paying.
Well, absolutely right. I saw the Premier today, the New South Wales Premier, say that he had to keep Eraring going because if he didn't, the higher power prices that would result would undermine support for renewable energy. And so let's just work through this. The Premier is saying that we have to keep a coal-fired power station going so that we can prove to people that renewable energy is the right option. I mean, he's just belled the cat himself there, saying that if we shut this coal-fired power station, which is the biggest, Eraring is the biggest coal-fired power station in the country, if that shuts, your power prices are going to go up. Doesn't that maybe tell us something about the relative costs here? I mean, quite usefully, Andrew, in this report that's released today, AEMO have actually listed a number of different options, 9 different options to fill the gaps that they've identified. They've specified exactly how much power you would need from wind, solar, batteries or gas. And we can use the CSIRO's own costs. AEMO didn't do this, but the CSIRO has a cost report which is biased towards renewables. But let's just use those costs. On those costs alone, in the next few years, New South Wales would have to spend $4 to $8.5 billion to fix these gaps. $4 to $8.5 billion on if it was to go down the solar, wind and battery route. Billions of dollars worth of batteries would be required. When we could just keep the coal-fired power station going, have cheaper prices, and it'd be a lot less expensive to the taxpayer.
Well, we're a long way from the days when Kevin Rudd, as Labor leader, this was when he was still in opposition, was telling us that Labor's policies back then to cut our emissions would cost every Australian $1 a year. $1 a year per head. What a joke. You've been conned, people. Matt Canavan, thank you so much for your time. Now, to a scandal that will destabilise the free world and inflame hatreds here. And where's our Prime Minister? Sitting on the fence again. The International Criminal Court overnight put a bomb under Israel. Its chief prosecutor, a British Muslim, said he wanted to charge Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defence Minister Benny Gantz with war crimes in Gaza.
The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder.
Now, the prosecutor even rubbed in this smear by saying at the same time he would charge, just to be fair, the top 3 leaders of Hamas for war crimes, including massacres and rapes and all the, the October 7 stuff, and making it seem like the leaders of an Islamist terror group are like the leaders of democratic Israel. Netanyahu was furious.
The outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, to seek arrest warrants against the democratically elected leaders of Israel is a moral outrage of historic proportions. Mr. Khan creates a twisted and false moral equivalence between the leaders of Israel and the henchmen of Hamas. This is like creating a moral equivalence after September 11th between President Bush and Osama bin Laden, or during World War II between FDR and Hitler. What a travesty of justice, what a disgrace.
Now, around the West, other leaders in Britain, Germany, Italy, etc., they've joined Netanyahu in damning the International Criminal Court here. So did US President Joe Biden.
Let me be clear. Contrary to allegations against Israel made by the International Court of Justice, what's happening is not genocide. We reject that.
But not our Anthony Albanese. Our Prime Minister once again tried to keep sweet with Muslim voters and the hard left.
US President Joe Biden says seeking the arrest warrants of Israeli leaders is outrageous. Do you agree with that?
Well, I don't comment on court processes in Australia, let alone court processes globally, of which Australia is not a party.
Do you agree with Joe Biden's comments? And is it?
I just answered the same question.
Oh no, your Prime Minister can't possibly comment on international court cases. Yet a couple of minutes later, this same bloke had no trouble commenting on another international court case in London, one involving WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, held for years in a British jail.
Which is enough. There's nothing to be served by the ongoing incarceration of Mr Assange.
What a hypocrite he is. Can't even remember what he just said 2 minutes before. Opposition Leader Peter Dutton called him out.
The Prime Minister squibbed it today when he was asked about this issue, and the Prime Minister had the opportunity at the ICC, where Australia was consulted in relation to this matter. They didn't weigh in and say that they were against this measure. Instead, they sat on the sideline and had nothing to say about it at all. Now,
this decision by the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor has still got to be approved by a panel of 3 judges. But it has already been backed by an advisory panel of 6 legal experts, including Amal Clooney, the celebrity wife of actor George. But I am stunned that they could so easily believe Hamas propaganda. Now, the main charge is that Netanyahu and Benny Gantz deliberately starved the people of Gaza to death. But Israel has in fact been sending hundreds of trucks a day of aid into Gaza, enemy territory, for months. This is one of the 402 trucks sent in just yesterday. And this is a market in central Gaza last Thursday, according to the Israeli organisation that's sending in the aid. But look not at the food so much as the people. Do they actually seem starved to you like walking skeletons because of Israel's war crimes? You know, it's weird. You've got Hamas sending out picture after picture of Palestinian children hurt by bombs. Why have there been so very few of people actually starved? Now, the few I've seen have been of children, particularly of children who we're actually told had other severe illnesses that might explain it, or seem physically handicapped, that might too. And in the photos, the parents I see holding these children, or next to them, particularly the mothers, they seemed quite plump. In fact, even Palestinian TV in the West Bank says the Hamas terrorists in Gaza are actually stealing food aid from Israel. And this became obvious when an Israeli bomb knocked down a wall of a Hamas warehouse.
اتضح بعد قصف الاحتلال لمخازن تسيطر عليها حماس تراكم أطنان من المواد الغذائية والمساعدات المتنوعة والتي كانت تحتكرها حركة حماس في الوقت الذي تعاني فيه غزة من المجاعة.
المساعدات ما بيجوا للأمة ولا بيجي للشعب كله.
في حج كتير بيوصل اللي بيوصل إشي قليل وبيتوزع هيك بيحكوا.
كله للبيوت إلهم. خليهم ياخذون ولا يطخون ولا يعملوا اللي بدهم إياه حماس.
That is Palestinian television saying that, not Israeli. Joining me from London is Melanie Phillips, journalist, broadcaster, author, columnist for the Times of London, and writer for, among other things, the Jewish Chronicle and the Jewish News Syndicate. Melanie Phillips, thank you so much for your time. This decision, your response?
It's an appalling judgment. It's an appalling ruling, I should say. The prosecutor has made a really obscene moral equivalence between the genocidal attackers who launched their appalling pogrom against the Israelis on October 7, and Israel's defense of itself against those people in Hamas and against the possibility of future attacks, which Hamas threaten to wage against Israel over and over again until they destroy it. That's the first thing. The second thing is that what the prosecutor has done in requesting these arrest warrants is to do so by using a set of lies of the kind that we've seen inflame mobs around the world. Every single one of those accusations is a lie. Israel is not starving the Gazans. It's bringing in vast amounts of aid. The people who are deliberately causing the Gazan civilians pain and distress, and indeed killing them deliberately, are actually the Hamas, who are stealing the aid for themselves, making a fortune from it. The idea that Israel is deliberately, intentionally, wantonly killing people, which is what the prosecutor has said, is not just a lie, it is actually a blood libel and the opposite of the truth, because the facts that we now know, insofar as we know how many Gazans have been killed, the United Nations has itself halved the totals that it was putting out, because the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza has admitted that many of its numbers of dead that it's been telling us, this vast number of civilians that have been killed, they took from the media. They're simply fabricated and made up. And when one looks at the likely tally of civilians and combatants killed, it would appear that for every one combatant that's killed, one civilian is killed by Israel. 1 to 1. That is a ratio of civilians killed to combatants, which is infinitely better than has ever been achieved by any country in the world in time of war. Far from deliberately setting out to kill civilians, Israel has done more than any other country to try to protect their lives. So every part of this is a lie. Every part of this is basically a blood libel. And the prosecutor has not just buried his own reputation, he has buried the court's reputation. It was already pretty shaky. The International Criminal Court, his predecessors were terrible. They more or less wrecked the court. He is now basically basically sealed its reputation in infamy, and he has used and abused human rights law to do it.
Yes, and they also seem to treat as true the allegation that Israel deliberately killed aid workers rather than that being a horrible mistake that Israel confessed to and sacked people for. They're treating that too, apparently, as true. I agree. Wild allegations are being treated as fact by prosecutors. Seems extremely gullible. Now, his response or the court's response to this allegation that, oh, here you are, you're equating Israel with Hamas. No. They say we're showing that we're neutral here, that it's the law above all, that no one is above the law. That's all we're doing. Do you buy that?
Absolutely not. First of all, it's certainly not neutral. It's not neutral if you say that people who are bent on genocide have the same status, should be afforded the same status in terms of what they've done as the people who are defending themselves against genocide. The implication of the prosecutor's move is to say that a just war can never be fought. A just war that is proportionate to the threat, to the risk, a just war that is proportionate in terms of numbers killed, a just war whose cause is just because you are defending yourself and your people against attack, that can never happen, because in war people die. Unfortunately, it's a great tragedy, and we should all be sympathetic, obviously, to civilians who die. The second thing to say is that what he's done by requesting these arrest warrants is to ride a coach and horses through a fundamental precept of the court itself. That is what's called the principle of complementarity. And what that means is that the court has no jurisdiction to intervene in a state's affairs unless that state is refusing to investigate the charges made against it itself. Now, in order for it to do so, the court has to give it the chance to do so. It has to ask it to do so, invite it to do so. Now, first of all, Israel has not been invited by the court to do so. And secondly, it is in the middle of the war in Gaza. It cannot do so at the moment. So basically, while the war is going on, the prosecutor has basically circumvented that ruling and has waded in without even giving Israel a chance to look at it themselves.
Look, the whole thing, every which way you look at it, seems so strange. If it's just no one's above the law, why has the International Criminal Court said nothing about Syria, one of Israel's enemies, of course, that has had a civil war, 500,000 people killed, the president having even barrel bombs dropped on his own people, nothing there. Israel always is in the gun. Melanie Phillips, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
After the break, Queensland's Labor Premier embarrasses Anthony Albanese by saying that Peter Dutton is right on immigration. Plus the big immigration lie after this. Immigration. I mean, the Albanese government's right. It's been trying to smash Peter Dutton for saying, well, he's got a plan to cut immigration if he becomes leader to a Prime Minister to ease the housing crisis. So Labor's go whack, 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 whack. Oops. Now Queensland's Labor Premier says Dutton is actually right. In fact, he's taking the credit himself for a good idea.
So I welcome Peter Dutton echoing my comments. At the moment, we have a population that is increasing at roughly twice the rate that the Queensland construction sector can build houses.
Joining me is the panel, Cameron Milner, former Chief of Staff to Labor leader Bill Shorten, now Director of GXO Strategies, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Cameron, the Prime Minister surely has a problem here. You've got polls showing overwhelming support for cutting immigration. Now Queensland Labor Premier says, that was my idea first. How can the Albanese government keep attacking Dutton for saying the same, slash immigration?
Well, don't you like it when Queenslanders get it right? Because Peter Dutton's right and Premier Stephen Miles are right. Albanese has opened the floodgates on immigration, opened the floodgates in a desperate attempt to avoid a recession. But look at what we're living with. We're living with huge rental lists. We're living with people unable to buy homes and houses for their families. Huge issues caused by Albanese losing control of migration and flooding the borders. That's the problem that Albanese is dealing with. And I'm just glad a couple of Queenslanders called him out for it.
But here, Michael, you're the hard-head money man here, the former treasurer. Now, can you explain perhaps a mystery to me? Because one of the big excuses we heard it again day in, day out since Dutton said this. One of the big excuses of mass immigration, we need all these migrants to fix our skills shortages. That excuse has been used ever since the year 2000 and before. In that time, we've imported more than 8 million immigrants and we're still short of skills. So clearly, it's not working, is it?
Well, I think it's a bit more complex than that. But I also note there was another Queenslander out there trying to put the knife into Dutton today, and that was Chalmers, and his argument was quite dopey. Look, Andrew, the bottom line here, of course, is that you do need immigration, and what Dutton's proposing, and I think he's outfoxed the government on this, and that's why they're squirming all over the place looking for an argument. He's only proposing a temporary suspension of it till you rebalance the program to focus on skilled migration, but also to get housing supply. Now, housing supply, and I can see why the Queensland Premier is out there arguing the case for this. A lot of the issues have to do with state governments not doing the proper planning and allowing the redevelopments to go ahead. So he's just finding a convenient excuse for his own incompetence up there. But the bottom line is you've got to have immigration. That 8 million that you talk about, that's led to a doubling of the size of the Australian economy over 20 or 30 years, and that's important. But you've got to keep the two things in balance, supply plus immigration and focused immigration. I think that's where the problem has been over the last 5 or so years. We've just been bringing in migrants for the sake of juicing up the economy rather than ensuring that our infrastructure meets the requirements, and a lot of that's at a state level.
Yeah, but hang on. I mean, Cameron, right, Michael says the economy's bigger, but what good is that if you've got to expand it among many more mouths to feed, and it comes at a cost of cohesion and crowded cities and this and that and the other, and housing prices? I mean, for all this immigration, we are poorer per capita than we have been for a few years now. I mean, surely there's more to... we should be able to fix our problems without always just importing the solution from overseas.
Well, and wouldn't it be nice if the skilled labourers were brickies and tilers and carpentry guys who could build a few houses as well, rather than public servants and pen pushers? So look, no, I think we've got to get the balance right. Clearly, we need to house the existing Australian population, and that's the point Peter Dutton's made. Peter Dutton says, let's pause to actually catch up to where we need to catch up to. Stephen Miles has said the same. If you come to South East Queensland, it's going topsy at the moment in terms of people trying to find housing. So no, we need to stop the floodgates, close them off, actually sort out our own backyard and do that hopefully with some skilled migrants who can build a few houses, Andrew.
See, this is the issue, Michael. I should give you a right of reply to what I just said. I've seen two surveys, one by the Australian Population Research Institute, saying that a lot of the people we bring in as skilled immigrants don't then work in the area that we brought them in for. And a lot of the students that we then give permanent residency to don't actually work in skilled work themselves. So this is the issue, really. I mean, it seems to be a very crude way of overcoming the skill shortages.
Well, you're right about that, Andrew. And as I said, there needs to be a focus on skill migration. I'll just take you up on that point. I mean, the per capita recession's only been a recent phenomenon. The 2 decades prior to that, we had growth in real incomes, even though productivity was low. So I don't think we should be throwing out the baby with the bathwater here. A temporary suspension of the migration program and a rebalancing towards the skills that we need, as Peter Dutton's proposing, makes a lot of sense, and I think it should be supported. But as a country, we do need to have a steady state of sustainable migration. Our birth rates, for a start, are declining. And if we don't do that, we're going to end up in all sorts of problems, supporting our welfare system, our infrastructure that's declining. So it's a matter of getting the balance right. And at the moment, it's not right.
Except, of course, if that's the model you have, you will keep growing every single year for the rest of our lives and our children's and grandchildren's lives. And I don't know that inevitably will lead to a better country. I mean, there's got to be some point where you reach an almost optimum population. I would have thought Japan certainly thinks that it's gone that way. But here's another issue. Where is the Prime Minister's leadership, Cameron? I mean, today refusing to comment on the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor wanting to charge Israel's Prime Minister with war crimes and saying, oh, I don't comment on overseas court cases, before then commenting on an overseas court case involving Julian Assange. I mean, what is going on?
Oh, it's terrible. And Albanese yet again has gone AWOL on international relations and international affairs, waiting for DFAT and then Penny Wong to tell him what to say after the press conference. Can I say about the ICC? I mean, what a farce. What a farce that you have a situation where there's an equivalency between Hamas and Israel. I mean, can we talk about the ICC for a moment? China's not a member, India, Russia, United States, Israel's not even a member. They've got Venezuela, the third most corrupt country in the world, as a member of the ICC. And this august body deems it necessary to charge a country that's defending its own people from terrorism. It's awful, Andrew, and I think the ICC stands in shame for what their prosecutor tried to do, which is basically created headlines for Hamas. That's all he's done.
Well, it's like the United Nations Human Rights Council that's got its members, China, Cuba, the countries like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, people that aren't... it's outrageous. Michael, what do you make of this?
I think Albanese is an absolute disgrace on this issue. And, I'm embarrassed that he has taken this position. He was clearly out of his depth. We ought to be suspending our membership of the ICC over this. We have a situation now where Albanese looks weaker than Biden, who we all know has got some mental challenges at the moment, and he's doddering around. He's been an embarrassment. I think this is the most embarrassing thing that I've seen come out of this Prime Minister. And I think it's appropriate that we consider.
There's a long list, Michael.
This one really grates because there's no basis for what he said today. And there needs to be a suspension of our membership until the situation's rectified in the way this place is run. Look, it's Monty Python legal philosophy as far as I can see. You basically find an excuse to justify the action you've taken politically. And it's a disgrace, an absolute disgrace.
That's it. Thank you very much to you both, Michael Costa, Cameron Milner. Really appreciate your time, as always. After the break, the anti-Israel extremists taking over the universities. It's time to call in the police, says Liberal frontbencher Sarah Henderson. She'll be on to say why and to put a rocket under one Vice-Chancellor in particular. After this. Now, is it time to call in the police? See, many of our top universities have let parts of their campuses be taken over by anti-Israel extremists who have set up camps there, screamed at Jewish students, invaded classrooms, chanted for the genocidal destruction of Israel from the river to the sea, and for an intifada, a term used to describe terrorist attacks on Israeli Jews. This, for instance, is Melbourne University, where students have occupied an arts faculty building, stopping classes there. Joining me is Sarah Henderson, the Federal Opposition's education spokesman. Sarah Henderson, thank you so much for joining me. Sarah, we've seen these protests against Israel, student protesters at so many universities now, occupying parts of the campuses. In Melbourne University's case, occupying a building, harassing students, chanting, frankly, genocidal chants, in my opinion, calling for the destruction of Israel. Calling in even for intifada, which is like a name for terrorist attacks on Israeli Jews. What should be done?
Well, Andrew, great to join you. And firstly, we've seen a shocking failure of leadership from the Prime Minister and the Education Minister. They should have thrown the book at universities which have not stood firm against anti-Semitism. Students should have the strongest action taken against them, both disciplinary action and also police action. The situation at Melbourne Uni and Sydney Uni is absolutely intolerable. Last Wednesday, students were warned that there would be serious consequences if they didn't leave the building. They're unlawfully occupying this building, of course, and yet no action has been taken. So bring in the police, restore law and order and safety to university campuses. And frankly, this is, as I say, a shocking reflection on the Albanese government, which has said very little about this alarming situation at some universities.
It's not a free speech issue?
It's not a free speech issue. Free speech is absolutely supported at every university, but here they have totally crossed the line. They are intimidating, they are harassing, they are subjecting all students to blatant anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic hate and vilification. Andrew, I spoke at the rally in Melbourne on Sunday and I was very close to the pro-Palestinian protest and it was really frightening, very, very intimidating. This is just unacceptable. Everyone on a university campus deserves to be safe and frankly, if Mark Scott, the Vice-Chancellor at Sydney, and Duncan Maskell, the Vice-Chancellor at Melbourne, can't do their job. We know Duncan, of course, has resigned, but they should go immediately. This should not be tolerated under any circumstances. And the fact that Jason Clare, who basically defended anti-Semitic chants and terrorist slogans saying these mean different things to different people, I mean, that is absolutely appalling. I mean, frankly, he is not up to the job. And as I say, it's just absolute chaos. It's bringing our universities into disrepute and law and order needs to be restored immediately.
It's interesting, isn't it? You mentioned Mark Scott, who used to be head of the ABC as well. Mark Scott is Vice-Chancellor of a university where students have chanted for Intifada, where a group of Muslim men marched through his campus chanting all sorts of slogans and carrying the Shahada flag of Islam. You've had one of his senior lecturers go to the rally 2 days after the October 7 massacre, the rally at Sydney Opera House, saying resistance is justified. That's a comment about that massacre. You've had children being taught how to chant Intifada, Intifada at the protest camp at his own university. And what's he done? What has this man done?
Andrew, it's absolutely disgusting. Mark Scott is rolling out the red carpet to the extremists, the activists, and frankly, the terrorist sympathisers. The senior academic, Nick Reamer, he should have sacked by now. Nick Reamer was also involved in blockading those two women from Tel Aviv University for an hour and a half in a room. That was absolutely shocking. Shocking leadership from Mark Scott, shocking leadership from the Albanese government. And to defend these terrorist chants, Andrew, I mean, it's just appalling. This is blatant anti-Semitism. This is blatant hate speech. This crosses the line. Students chanting Intifada, the river to the sea and all the rest of it, intimidating and harassing, they should be expelled. And as I say, if Mark Scott cannot do his job, then he should go.
Yeah, but maybe Mark Scott knows the zeitgeist more than you or I, Sarah, because this is a bloke who's made a successful career out of not resisting extremists. You might recall that he did nothing, or said almost nothing, when an extremist called Zaki Mallah actually crashed. It was invited onto the Q&A to grill one Liberal frontbencher. Here he is.
I pleaded guilty to threatening to kill ASIO officials. The Liberals now have just justified to many Australian Muslims in the community tonight to leave and go to Syria and join ISIS because of ministers like him.
Sarah Henderson, that was on Q&A when Mark Scott was head of the ABC. He didn't do much then. It's not doing much now. Is there a pattern?
Well, regrettably, I think there is a bit of a pattern. He mishandled that situation with that convicted terrorist very, very badly back in 2015. And it now does look a bit like Mark Scott is rolling out the red carpet to the extremists and the activists and not taking appropriate action. I mean, the bottom line is, Andrew, everyone must be safe at Sydney University, and that is certainly not the case at the moment.
Absolutely. Sarah Henderson, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.
After the break, a danger zone. Why am I not surprised that this latest therapy for the frustrated is a very woman thing? And Joe Biden's latest amazing gaffes after this. Now, we tackle here the dangerous topics. Dangerous if you're a man, at least in this case, and tackle it a little tentatively. I read there's a new therapy. It's to deal with your stress or your frustration or your anger. It's called a rage ritual, and it looks like this. You do see a lot of women there. In fact, USA Today reports that rage rituals have garnered attention on TikTok, where they've resonated particularly with women. I think there's an important point here, which I'm not prepared actually to sketch out without some help from my Tuesday panel. Will Kingston, host of Fire at Will, a weekly podcast from The Spectator on politics and culture. And Sky News host Danica DiGiorgio, host of Danica and James on Sky News on Sundays at 8 p.m. Danica, I'm afraid you're it for obvious reasons. You start. I'd rather not say why I am not surprised that women particularly are attracted to this rage therapy, but are you?
Look, Andrew, sorry, I'm trying to still recover from that exorcism that we just witnessed on our screens. I'm actually really trying to figure out why these women are so angry. And according to Google, Andrew, it's because they're angry at men. They're angry at their partners. They're angry at their husbands. They've been told they have to suppress their anger. You know, you can't be angry. Men can show their anger. And this is the way that they're doing it. Apparently, they're coughing up $4,000 to go and beat the ground with sticks and carry on like pork chops. I don't understand it, Andrew. I feel like there's better ways of dealing with your anger, but that's just me. I'm very concerned that women are out there doing this, I've got to say.
I had no idea a stick was so expensive, but there you go. Will, give us an opinion on this. You're usually very literate and well-informed.
Usually. This is dangerous territory for a 30-something white male, Andrew, but I'll give it a crack. There is something interesting going on with, I think, what is like a warped brand of modern feminism. If you look at some of the studies of happiness over the last 70-odd years, you'll notice that men's happiness hasn't really changed. Men are about as happy as they were in the 1950s. Women's happiness has fallen off a cliff. Women today, if you look at all the studies, they are considerably less happy than they were. And paradoxically, that's come at the same time as legal rights and equality for women has increased. And I think this is a conversation we need to have as a society, in that this sort of modern feminism, which says that women can have absolutely everything and they can have it all at the same time, creates unrealistic expectations. And when those expectations aren't met, I think you see that a lot of women aren't happy. So look, this sort of stuff is funny to watch in these clips, but there is a serious point, and that is around the happiness of women in society today.
Yeah, I think, that whole concept of women's rage has been around for many, many centuries, scaring the hell out of men. Have a look at the Maenads, the women of Bacchus, and the riots there, where if men dared to disturb women in the forest, they could be torn to pieces. I don't know, and women tend to be more religious. I don't know whether that's got anything to do with this, and I think I'll stop right there, Danica, before I get into real trouble. But to safer stuff, I wonder if this is probably more serious, or maybe not. Joe Biden, the US president, has already had many people, of course, wondering about his obvious mental and physical decline. Two more examples of this problem from just the past couple of days. Extraordinary. First, here he is. Here's Biden claiming he was vice president during the pandemic. which every American will know actually happened when Donald Trump was president.
And when I was vice president, things were kind of bad during the pandemic. And what happened was Barack said to me, go to Detroit and help fix it.
Biden staff said later, well, it's a simple mistake. He actually meant to say he was vice president during the recession, not the pandemic, although that's not a great boast either. And then there was this Biden talking about an American still actually held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. Here he is.
My administration is working around the clock to free the remaining hostages, just as we have freed hostages already. And here with us today is Hirsch Goldberg Poland, and still, he is not here with us, but he's still being held by Hamas.
Danica, are these simple slips or just constant signs of senility?
I think it's absolutely constant signs of senility, Andrew, but we've seen this going on for some time. It's the constant fumbles, bumbles, mumbles. If he's not tripping, he's slipping. He's forgetting things. He can't read his teleprompter, as you can see there. His eyes are straining just to read it. And it's actually a very sad state of affairs, because if this was your loved one, if this was a family friend or a friend, you would actually have to have a serious conversation with them about care, the next step in their lives and what that would look like. Yet apparently this is the leader of the free world who is completely incoherent and making constant gaffes on a weekly basis. And it's sad that this is happening. And it's clearly, it's become evident he's being propped up on a daily basis. They're obviously giving him something to prop him up, but it's not working. And I don't know how the Democrats have gone this far without saying we need to replace this man. How can he go around the rig again?
Well, good question.
Here's a good question. The great irony here, Andrew, is that there is almost no other job in the United States that Biden is fit for other than being president, which apparently is now a 3-day-a-week ceremonial role whilst other people run the country in the shadows. That is the great conspiracy theory of our time. And I think in years to come, we will hear a lot more about this shadow government that has been running the United States. And I think there's another conspiracy theory, which Danica hit on, which I think is more likely than not, which is he is being pumped up with a cocktail of drugs to get him through the day. They're not admitting to it in the White House, but it's the only logical explanation that explains how his energy declines precipitously during major speeches. And it's the only thing that explains his really odd visual appearance in his eyes in videos. I can't believe that this is something which isn't being called out more.
I think you're absolutely correct, because it's chalk and cheese how he appears in some places, almost totally out of it. And then, there's a little switch on. That does seem chemically enhanced. Danica, and I did read in one of the left-wing papers, I can't remember what it was New York Times or something, that he does indeed work very short days. He can't get through anything long. It's really weird, isn't it?
Well, it is really weird, Andrew, and this is the thing. Of course, he can't work long days given his age, and this is why. How long can we let this go on for? They've actually shown a clip in the last few days of him reading from a teleprompter where he seems his eyes are open, he's very alert, and then 2 days later he's squinting and looks sick. So there is no doubt he's being propped up somehow. But there's got to be a better candidate available. This is just ridiculous to watch this all the time.
Well, you say the better candidate, but he says he's it, and there's now no opportunity to get rid of him. The Democrats are stuck with him for the next election. We're out of time, I'm afraid. Will Kingston, Danica DiGiorgio, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. I don't know. It's how the thing is, of course, he's got to go. He's running for an election for another 4 years. You look at that. You see his rate of decline even in this presidency, and you think, how on earth could he possibly do that? That's it from me. Sherry Markson up next. Good night.